The Sixers Talk podcast with you once again. So glad you could join us, Danny Pommells, along with the triumphant return of Noah Levick, our Sixers writer extraordinaire for NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. Noah, we appreciate you being here with us. How are you, sir?
Doing fine. Yeah, happy to be back on. Eagles are 1-0, and I see you have the attire to match. So
go Birds, baby.
Yeah, much of the city's in a positive mood right now.
Hey, bro, it goes a long way when the Eagles win. Things are different around the Delaware Valley. I think that's a well-known fact. Did you get to enjoy the game? Were you checking it out? Were you entrenched?
Yeah, I was actually just on our desk helping out, setting up some of the Eagles stories, Rube's observations, Dave Zingaro. Both those guys obviously do great coverage for us. So, I checked out as much of it as I could and was impressed with Jalen Hurts, like I'm sure everyone else was.
Hey, check out the Eagle Eye podcast for all of the Eagles info. As Noah said, Ruben Frank, Dave Zingaro do great work. Rube's observations always worth checking out, including Dave's insights as well. We got some insight here on this Ben Simmons situation that in the past couple of weeks it's just continued to ramp up. And we're reaching this point, Noah, where the September 28th training camp deadline, October 21st, he's due 25% of his annual salary. We're going to get into who maybe fills the void if Ben Simmons does leave, some other training camp storylines we're interested in, but I think it's unavoidable, the Ben Simmons saga. And I think the point that we want to get to about it is who blinks first? Who is Daryl Morey going to lower his asking price? Does Ben Simmons actually report to training camp? And they try to figure this thing out without, going their separate ways so soon. Are you feeling like the Sixers blink first in this stalemate, Noah, or does Simmons actually show up to camp? Is he bluffing a little bit? And we'll report to avoid these fines and suspensions that we'll get into.
I mean, my current read on it is it would not be at all surprising if neither side blinks for quite a while here. You did mention, September 28th camp will begin. I believe it's October 1st that he's due 25% of his salary this year. And, if the Sixers were to suspend him, then there would be a dispute as to whether he's actually owed that salary. But look, I figure the money is not going to be a massive deterrent for Simmons' side. He's already made quite a lot. He's due to make quite a lot in the next 3 seasons. And, the reporting suggests that he does not want to be in Philadelphia. And conversely, that the Sixers do not want to settle for a deal, that doesn't recoup a substantial return. So the current gut feel of the situation right now is that this lingers into the season, but we shall see. I just don't get the sense that either side is especially prone to blink, and I think both sides have shown that they're willing to get quite uncomfortable, given that here we are 2 weeks before camp, and the prevailing situation is just, uncertainty about exactly how this is going to be resolved.
Yeah, I misspoke. October 1st for sure. 25% of his annual salary due of his $177 million rookie extension. And then 12 installments begin on November 15th of the other 50% of his salary. He collects half his annual salary before the season even begins. So props to Simmons and his people for working that out, because that's a pretty favorable deal. As we come up here on training camp, and it's weird, if neither side blinks, then it is unfathomable to think we're entering another season where the Sixers were able to accomplish the top seed in the East for the first time in 20 years, but they are not the favorite in the Eastern Conference going into next season. This doesn't look like a championship caliber season, which so many people who endured the process and just have followed the Sixers team for so many years have been waiting for. And possibly another season where you're not getting the utmost from Joel Embiid's prime years here. So where is the optimism? How do you find the hope if you're thinking the stalemate continues and is pretty much just this Cold War going on between these two sides. Where's the optimism for Sixers fans?
Yeah, you laid out the negatives. Well, I do think there are a lot of positives of a potential scenario where Simmons is technically on the roster but is refusing to play, and a trade is, not happening. I think, firstly, young guys would get more opportunities. One of them, I know we're going to get into more later, is Tyrese Maxey. Was really impressive in summer league. Obviously, did some great things his rookie season in big moments, including in Game 6 against Atlanta. And you figure he would receive more opportunities. Players like Shake Milton, you'd think, would again be in the mix, getting heavy rotation minutes. And just overall, the Sixers are a younger team when you consider Anthony Tolliver, Mike Scott, George Hill, Dwight Howard. These guys were all 33 plus, and now they're no longer on the roster. So I think that's a bit of a positive. I think also the reality is, even without Simmons, they're still a playoff caliber team. Who knows exactly where they'd sit in that Eastern Conference pecking order. But Joel Embiid was an MVP runner-up. Tobias Harris was a borderline all-star. Seth Curry's coming off an outstanding postseason. And they are in the conference's top seed. And then also, I think the perspective that maybe softens the blow a little of this thing still not being done is that the ultimate goal of a Simmons deal is to better position yourself for playoff success. Like we saw Ben Simmons, his flaws were most glaring in the postseason. So, if you want to be patient and you want to wait for the right deal that does give you the best chance of maximizing your playoff odds, then I think maybe that makes the concept of waiting this thing out a little more palatable for fans, I think, if you look at it from that angle.
You make some great points. I think a lot of fans, along with those thoughts of, how does this, work out in our favor, there's also of how could this all have been avoided. And it's just weird that when you think about how the season went, and, Joel and Doc Rivers commenting after the Game 7 loss that, some things that Ben and his team didn't find favorable toward him. It couldn't have been just that kind of like tipped the kettle over of Joel saying that, the turning point was when Ben passed up the dunk and they went 1 of 2 from the free throw line, and Doc saying, he wasn't sure if Ben Simmons was a championship caliber point guard, in so many words. It couldn't have been just that as the tipping point. There has to be, more to it than those few things that has just driven Simmons off the edge, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably most boils down to no one is happy when you fall short of expectations, and that's what the Sixers did again in the playoffs. And then the postseason prior to this, the team wasn't well constructed, but once Simmons had that left knee injury, never had much of a chance of making any postseason noise. But yeah, I think it's inherently tenuous, right? When your two best players both prefer to be near the painted area. I don't think it means that Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid are or were doomed to fail. The Sixers have been a very good team when those two have been on the court together. But Embiid, it hasn't taken a lot of reading between the lines, even in past years, to see that he's tried to prod Ben Simmons to expand his game, to shoot more. He's talked about how he loves it when Simmons does, shoot threes. And you saw him, how much he celebrated when Simmons made that three in a preseason game. And, so I think just some tension and some unhappiness is inevitable when you combine that not supernatural fit, and then you also don't win the way you expected to win. And this team has been very close on a couple of occasions. We all know the quadruple bouncer was a devastating moment, and this postseason, I think in some ways topped that, because it wasn't like against the Raptors, where that was a very good team with established star player in Kawhi Leonard. I think in many people's eyes, the Sixers were superior to the Hawks, and Simmons's failings in that series were, of course, a big reason why they didn't get it done. So, yeah, there's a lot that goes into why we are at this point, how we got to this point, and part of it, as you alluded to earlier, is just that Daryl Morey is a guy who will wait as long as it takes to get the deal that he's looking for. So obviously there have been deals on the table here, and none of them have been to Morey's liking, and so here we are.
I love that you said that he'll wait as long as it takes, because there are really levels to this stalemate as we are at this point, where yes, we had the training camp deadline. Yes, he's due a payment October 1st. But what will the Sixers do as a response if Ben does decide not to show up? Will they fine him per day for failure to render services? Will they suspend him and then fine him a much larger amount? Which could total as much as maybe $4 or $5 million if he sits out all of training camp, and maybe even withhold that 25% of his annual salary, which is due October 1st. So there are a lot of decisions here, from small slaps on the wrist maybe to maybe something that might get Ben's attention in order for him to report to camp. So it is really unprecedented for us to James Harden situation, or Jimmy Butler's, or maybe even Kyrie's situation. There's Kyrie being the fact that he has not going missing isn't the right term, but he has decided to take time off from the team, whether the team approved of it or not. Depends on what you believe, for birthday parties or family gatherings or what have you. So it's a really unprecedented situation, and I don't think Ben Simmons is showing up in a fat suit with a pillow under his shirt, like Harden, to try to make the team think he's out of shape or whatever. However you want to look at it. The point being is, how do you think that if Morey is so stubborn, and it seems that Rich Paul and Simmons camp are the same way? I know we're getting into the who blinks first conversation, but how heavy-handed do you think the Sixers are willing to be?
It's a great question. I think a large part of this has to depend on the way Joel Embiid feels, the way Tobias Harris, Danny Green, Doc Rivers feel. And some of that might be something that the Sixers even try to gauge in the early days of camp, like just where guys are at with this, and if they think that it's at all tenable to move forward with Ben Simmons not out there on the court with them, but still on the roster. To me, just suspending him is a bit of an extreme option, because
Right.
it removes
You lose all leverage at that point. Yeah.
It removes the possibility, however low the odds currently seem, of Simmons eventually suiting up if you do suspend him. But then again, a fine is a very small slap on the wrist if we're talking about a few $1,000s for someone who's making about $180 million over the duration of this contract. So maybe the fine is would be logical as an initial move, but it would be surprising if the fine was persuasive or some sort of tipping point in Simmons saying, oh boy, I don't want to be fined a couple thousand more. I'll show up to day 3 of camp, show up to day 1 or 2, So yeah, it's obviously tricky terrain to navigate. And I think just foundationally, you have to gauge where all the key players are at with this. Obviously, ownership plays a big role here too. How okay they are with the idea of someone who's being paid millions of dollars, not playing for their team this season or the first couple months of this season or whatever. And I think Joel Embiid just has to be valued very highly here. We know Daryl Morey has a close relationship with him and trusts his views. And even last offseason, the Sixers added shooting after Joel Embiid, asked them to do so. So I think that's kind of important to get some answers there, get some clarity on where everyone's at, and then you have to make perhaps some of those tough decisions about fines, suspensions, etc.
Yeah, and it's weird. It's like, you're looking for who on the team is really seeing it Ben Simmons' way. Who's in his corner? Which you don't really get the feeling that there are players here on the Sixers that are like, yeah, they did Ben wrong, or he deserves an apology from what Doc Rivers and Joel. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't seem like there's really this groundswell of support for his position on holding out training camp, demanding a trade, or any of the sort. So I mean, the whole Jimmy Butler thing really came to a head really fast in Minnesota, and surprised a lot of people. Obviously, when he ended up here, but just the fact that he was forcing his way out and everything was at a point where it was they were at an impasse. So maybe another superstar as training camp approaches starts to feel that way, which initiates maybe some mutual, hey, well, we got a guy that doesn't want to be here, and so do you. A guy that doesn't want to be there, maybe there's something happens there. But outside of that, I can't see unless something unforeseen happens. I don't see any circumstance where the Sixers need Ben more than Ben needs the Sixers. I don't see any circumstance where Ben would cave or change his position when he's already, waited all of the summer in order to state how he feels. We haven't heard from Ben specifically, but from the reports and from his camp that he's not coming to camp and he's going to sit out until a trade is made. The Sixers need Ben more than Ben needs them. So I don't see him moving. And I know Daryl Morey is the guy who is going to wait and be patient and staunch and whatnot. But I feel like the Sixers will need to move before Ben does.
Yeah, and the variable we haven't discussed here, of course, is what stance the league might take on all of this. It's certainly not
unprecedented, man. It's really
it's unprecedented, and you don't want to set a new precedent that this is okay, just as a league where you want to have that standard of people under contract, are obligated to fulfill that contract. So that's a massive X factor here, and I don't think we know exactly what Adam Silver and company would do, but it's probably a fair guess to say that they would not be thrilled if this lasts into October and Ben Simmons is refusing to put on a Sixers jersey. So another thing to consider there as well.
Ready to make a move? A Wilmington University education can take you where you want to go. WilmU works online or in person. Learn more at wilmu.edu. The Ben Simmons saga will resolve itself eventually. Something will have to happen, whether it comes February, whether it's November, something will have to happen, and we will be here every step of the way trying to dissect all the details. Interestingly enough, in all that has happened in Ben Simmons offseason, whether it's been him at Wimbledon, whether it's him buying a new house at LA, meeting with the Sixers brass, the open runs and him playing pickup ball has continued to probably be one of the most consistent things about him that Sixers fans don't like, because the Simmons that they see in the open runs is often not the same guy that shows up, in the NBA regular season and playoffs. But in those open runs, one of the videos, it was interesting because Tyrese Maxey pops up and he's looking smooth, crispy, similar to what we saw in the summer league, just looking like the type of player you want to have on your team. There was one beautiful pass that Ben dropped on him that Maxey shot a jump shot on. I think it was a three. I'm not sure, but just Maxey looking good in the offseason, especially something you want to see as a Sixers fan. And it was weird because it kind of debunked the notion that Simmons hadn't spoken to anyone from the team, because here he is, playing hoops with Tyrese Maxey. But if Ben does leave the organization, which we feel is inevitable, can Tyrese Maxey take this gigantic step forward and fill the shoes left behind at the point guard position? And definitely the expectations are not for him to fill that position in a 3-time All-Star, runner-up defensive player of the year type of way. dynamic playmaker Ben Simmons type way, but in his own way, in Tyrese Maxey's own way. Can he step in and fill some of that void that Simmons brings to the team of setting up the offense, creating for others, giving defenses hell? I mean, maybe he's not going to, be the guy that's getting the top assignment defensively on the other team, but he could probably fill a lot of the needs that the Sixers have in creating off the dribble, being a guy who maybe draws another defender and can kick to an open man or what have you. Are you seeing those things for Tyrese Maxey in his second year? Can he take this leap forward? And can Doc Rivers even trust a guy that young to be able to do that, which isn't really in his pedigree?
Yeah, maybe not every single thing that you listed, but I think many of them are realistic. I thought it was really interesting. Before Summer League, Maxey said that he was in touch with Doc Rivers, and the instructions he got were focus on how to run a team. So I think there are a lot of nuances to that, and it wouldn't be fair to expect Maxey to nail every single one of those right off the bat. But the fact that he is focusing on it, I think, is positive. And I think with experience, he's the kind of guy who's shown he probably can pick up on some of the little details of, okay, here's how you get guys into sets. Here's when you know when to push the pace and when to take it easy. Even in his rookie year, he didn't turn the ball over a lot. So I think it wouldn't be so insane to expect some pretty sizable development in terms of Maxey as a facilitator and as a true point guard sort of player. I think ultimately, though, his greatest strength is he's excellent at getting to the rim. He has a great floater, even though he didn't lean on it as much in the latter half of last season. And he just puts a lot of pressure on a defense. And I think all those qualities are excellent, and he should continue to get better there. I think one of the major questions with him is obviously the three-point shooting. We saw in Summer League, he was very willing to shoot threes. He made some impressive threes off the dribble, including one or two step backs. I'm a little skeptical that he makes extremely dramatic growth there, but if he's in the mid 30s as a three-point shooter, that's obviously a big step up for where he was last year. And it would be nice for the Sixers, of course, to have a lead ball handler who's not shy about shooting, whose jump shot deserves respect. And I think it's a decent bet that Tyrese Maxey would check off those boxes. But it's really intriguing to think, okay, so he's a good NBA player. What does that mean in terms of like how much he can play in a playoff game at a high level? I think we saw flashes last year that he could play 30 plus minutes and be really good. But whether he can do that consistently, not so sure. But the Sixers do have a few combo-esque guards on their roster. Shake Milton, Seth Curry handled the ball a lot last postseason. So maybe those guys help a little bit with the ball handling duties. And maybe Maxey's in a situation where he is able to play 25 to 30 strong minutes per game. I don't think that's so unrealistic, even though he is still only 20 years old. So, yeah, I think he's one of the most interesting guys right now on the Sixers roster as we all try to project how roles and responsibilities might change, should Simmons get dealt.
Doc Rivers was critical of his team last season when he mentioned that at a certain point, they were all pretty much the same size with a certain rotation or guys coming off the bench that, they didn't have as much length or, varied, sizes on the court where they were able to guard multiple positions and be interchangeable. Does that worry you, Maxey's size, considering obviously it's probably, at the top of the list when it comes to guys who can create off the dribble and get to the cup and have, versatility with the floater and getting all the way to the rim or pulling up for a jumper in that regard. But do you feel like they would lose so much defensively with him, being in that rotation 25 to 30 minutes at the point guard spot, maybe even starting there if they don't have any better options?
I think regardless, if you lose Ben Simmons, you're going to be making downgrades just in terms of your overall defense, and then also as far as your versatility. So yeah, I do think that's a valid concern to some extent. I think one of the other difficult questions posed by a Simmons trade would be how much Danny Green can handle defensively. Like, can he guard star players? How many positions can he guard well? I think clearly he's not as good at as Ben Simmons in either of those areas, but um, perhaps even at in his mid 30s, he's still able to do some of those things at a decent level. We shall see. But yeah, with Maxey, I do like that even starting in his rookie year, he's a strong kid. He's not very tall, but he doesn't get bumped around. He gets where he wants to go offensively, and then defensively, we saw good progress throughout the year, navigating over screens, understanding scouting reports, knowing his rotations and his jobs defensively, and his size just to me didn't look like an obstacle with any of those defensive tasks that were on his plate. But yeah, he's realistically not going to be able to guard wings. He's going to be able to guard one, maybe two positions. And you hope he does that at an average to above average level for the Sixers. But no question, if you lose Ben Simmons, it's very unlikely that you're getting equal defensive value in return in that trade.
Are you have you given thought to the idea of what it might look like if they trade Ben and bring in another point guard where Maxey might fit in? Just an example, like if they were to get like Markkanen and Colin Sexton from Cleveland as part of a trade, like those were like the two marquee guys, and Sexton obviously would be a starter. And you would probably keep Seth Curry at the two. Are you concerned about where Maxey might fall and how his development might be stunted, or where he fits in the rotation with a guard of that type, or someone who comes in and takes the starters' minutes?
Not especially. I think what we were just discussing, the scenario where he's a starting point guard or playing starting point guard-esque minutes, is probably just, if we're looking at it objectively, there's a greater level of concern there. But we all know he can be a spark plug off the bench. There's nothing wrong with him doing that again in year 2 or year 3. And Doc Rivers will give him more minutes if he earns those minutes, and maybe he'll find a way to play him the minutes that he deserves, you would think. But I wouldn't have a great concern in that situation about Maxey specifically, just because I think we already know that he's not someone who struggles with, oh, how do I come and call it off the bench and make an impact? Like, he immediately has that injection of energy and pace, and I'd imagine he'll sustain that regardless, of the situation. Yeah, that's how I kind of feel about that potential scenario. But as we know, there are a lot of hypotheticals, and everything's still on the table here.
Man, everything is still everything is still on the table. Easy for me to say, but it's a little too close for comfort, man. I mean, as the days go by, I mean, September 28th is just waiting, and potentially, this thing could come to a head at any point in these coming days. So it's like we're on Simmons' watch in a sense every day of what the latest developments are, whatever the changes may be, or even if Maxey is included in some type of Simmons deal in order to sweeten the pot. So just a lot of questions, not a lot of answers right now, but we're going to take a quick break and then get into some other training camp storylines that Noah and I are intrigued about after this time. Ready to make a move? A Wilmington University education can take you where you want to go. WilmU works online or in person. Learn more at wilmu.edu. Hey man, time waits for no one, and training camp is quickly approaching. It's weird. The NBA season starts in 36 days from today. So October will be here before you know it. And we outlined a lot of these dates that are upcoming. And hey, you know what? We didn't even get your thoughts on the Sixers missing the trade exception, $8 million+ that just went out the window on September 7th, I believe it was, for the Al Horford deal. Did that surprise you before we get into some other things?
Didn't surprise me, given that the Simmons thing is still unresolved and you want to leave as many options open as possible. And also given that they're already a luxury tax team. So my sense is it would have had to be an outstanding deal for them to actually use that trade exception. So didn't surprise me, but yeah, it's obviously reasonable to always have a little bit of regret when you let kind of an opportunity like that slip by, but there's no obligation to use it if it doesn't make sense for your team. So yeah, I can understand, given where the team is at now, why they wouldn't pull the trigger if there wasn't a great player out there.
Right. I was just surprised. You didn't have to use all of it. You could have used some of it, whatever. But Noah always providing some even keel perspective on what the Sixers are doing, and we appreciate you for that as always. Curious what you're thinking though here as training camp is approaching and the many storylines that are out there for the Sixers outside of Ben Simmons, because this is an interesting team. It's a fun team. It's a team that is of the upper echelon in the Eastern Conference, although maybe not the upper echelon, but among those teams. Is there anything in particular that you're interested in focusing on, curious about as training camp approaches outside of Simmons?
For me, it's Andre Drummond as the new backup center, the Dwight Howard
Wow.
replacement.
Look at how far we've come. Look at Andre Drummond and Joel Embiid on the same team.
Yeah, right. I mean, the interpersonal dynamics here are obviously fascinating.
Right.
And we're talking about a multi-time All-Star, guy that's led the league in rebounding, I believe, 4 times. So someone with a pedigree, but someone who, like Dwight Howard, has very well-known and significant weaknesses. So just the idea of how's that all going to come together, and will Andre Drummond actually be an upgrade over Howard? Will he be a viable player in the postseason? Will his foul shooting be an issue? Will he stick to his strengths and not turn the ball over so much the way he has in recent seasons? So I think some of the questions are similar to what they were with Dwight Howard. But then another variable here is Joel Embiid's health. Of course, that's always a key storyline with the Sixers, but we probably shouldn't overlook that he played the conclusion of the Sixers postseason on a meniscus tear, and all indications are that he should be good to go for training camp.
Although they did opt out of surgery, so there was no surgery involved.
Yeah, no surgery has happened. They seem to feel that he's in a good spot physically and are pleased with where he's at. But, that injury was a significant one. We saw it hampered him in some key playoff moments. And now, yet again, can he get through a full season healthy? Can he be healthy when they need him most in the playoffs? Wasn't his fault last year. It was a really unfortunate injury. But he has now, has the Supermax extension that will kick in a couple of years. So that maybe adds even a little more to these stakes of, okay, is Joel Embiid in his prime years ever going to be healthy for a full season? Is he ever going to be at his peak level when the Sixers are playing crucial playoff games? So if he's not, Andre Drummond becomes a lot more important. This will be his first year as a backup center since he was a 19-year-old rookie on the Pistons. So that will be actually a little, unfamiliar for him in some ways. But if he has to step in as a Joel Embiid replacement, should Embiid get injured, it's at least a role that he knows well. And then then we see how he does in that role. So I think sort of those two intersecting storylines are really big for the Sixers. And I'm really curious to see how Andre Drummond does, and relatedly, where Joel Embiid is at health-wise.
Some great perspective there, because you got a guy like Drummond who we've seen in different, these different incarnations of his career, whether it be in Cleveland or in Detroit and the interactions he and Joel have had, and Joel dominating him. But is there something they can learn from each other? How about that? Like, they're on the same team. Is there some of Drummond's game that can rub off on Joel? Is there some of Joel's game that can rub off on Drummond? How long will we expect, these two to be together in this front court? I'm looking toward Matisse Thybulle as a guy that's really intriguing me. You know, I was really pleased and excited from this open run video that came out of him with Tobias Harris, and they're playing a pickup game, and Matisse is just mauling people, from the highlights we saw defensively, which we saw so much of in the Olympic run up to him and Team Australia winning a bronze medal. We are all waiting for the offensive step forward of Matisse Thybulle, although I am completely confident in what he brings on the defensive end, and that even if Ben Simmons isn't here, he can take on that responsibility of guarding the other team's best player. But I'm looking for maturity on that end, definitely, because hopefully the referees are more friendly with him and give him more latitude on some of the whistles that he receives, but some of that he brings on himself with, over pursuing or reaching, or when he does get beat of doing things that induce fouls. But offensively, and it can be more than just the 3-point shot. We can boil it down to the 3-point shot and the 3-and-D aspect, because there will be those opportunities for him. Curious how those opportunities come about without Ben Simmons, if that's what is in the Sixers' future, because Simmons set up so many opportunities for Danny Green and others, and kicking out to the 3-point line. But I'm curious how Matisse's shot will come along, if he can step into that role more here. I believe this is year 4 for him, and year 3 for him. And I'm curious if he can even develop some to the basket game, not even necessarily with expectations of him, drawing fouls and getting to the line, but just being able to put the ball on the floor and penetrate and cause some havoc that way, a slash into the cup. And, this guy's got tremendous athleticism and bounce. There should be more alley-oops available for him. There should be more of that those transition opportunities for him. So I'm looking for a step forward in those ways. And I'm glad Danny Green is back for another season to help facilitate some of that, because he can show Matisse some of what the formula is and the success that he's enjoyed, and maybe show Matisse how, he's able to develop into such a significant player when it comes into making threes. Obviously, he's had a great shot for a while, as well as playing defense as well, and putting those things together.
Yeah, I mean, Danny Green last season had some great insight on how Matisse Thybulle obviously has these exceptional defensive talents, but Green can be helpful just given his volume of experience with some of the little nuances that might not show up on a scouting report. So, okay, the scouting report might say Booker likes the one dribble jumper left, but Green might have the little tip of, here and there you can swat down for steals when he's, trying to make that hesitation move right. Just those little teaching moments.
Yeah,
it's definitely nice that they're both on this team, still heading into this upcoming season. And I think also something that might bubble up to the surface with what you're talking about is, will Matisse Thybulle start some games over Danny Green? Obviously, the Sixers' preference here appears to be that Danny Green's the full-time starter, that he shoots the 3 well, and that none of his slumps are extremely prolonged. But Green, even by his standards, did have a very strong shooting season. He was over 40% on a career high volume. And if his percentages drop off a little bit, and maybe he's not doing so well in some of these matchups against star players, does Doc Rivers consider starting Matisse Thybulle, especially if he makes that offensive development that you're talking about? So I don't think that's something we see materialize as a storyline early in the season, but middle of the season, late in the season, in the playoffs, wouldn't shock me if Matisse Thybulle were to start games over Danny Green. But of course, the Sixers hope they both do very well, and that is a conversation only because Thybulle makes this incredible development.
Man, you won't find two more likable guys when it comes to the fan base than Matisse Thybulle and Tyrese Maxey. For obvious reasons, on the court, fans want these two guys to take gigantic steps forward this year. And, off the court, they're so easy to root for and likable and young and ambitious. And obviously, Matisse and his social media prowess always draws people in. And it seems, maybe the combination of what Maxey brings and Thybulle brings can help fill the Ben Simmons void if he's not here. Thybulle taking on the defensive role of guarding the other team's best player, maybe when he's on the court, and then and like you said, late in the season, maybe if some of the development comes and he's taking those starters minutes, and maybe Maxey as a point guard, filling the void left behind by Ben Simmons, but playmaking and scoring ability. I guess Joel Embiid and Andre Drummond can pick up the rebounding. I guess that there's the replacement of Ben Simmons. But we're going to get out of here on the Sixers Talk Pod, but I'd be remiss if I didn't send a huge thank you out to all of our listeners and our viewers on YouTube. Our last couple of podcasts went through the roof. 10,000 on the trade exception, 10,000 impressions on the trade exception podcast. And then Ben Simmons driven podcast did 20,000 impressions. So we appreciate you guys, and always will respect and honor the fact that we will bring it because we know you are watching and listening, and we appreciate, that you guys trust us with our perspectives and opinions here. And it's great to have Noah Levick back from vacation here as we're ramping up towards training camp, because I'm sure he will be giving you a bevy of information on our website as well as here on the podcast. Anything you're working on, Noah, you wanted to drop a mention about?
Yeah, tomorrow we'll have a film review on George Niang, someone we didn't get into, but
Great.
With Drummond, one of those notable, external additions. So yeah, it worked with our great video producer, Steve Graham, to kind of scout Niang's game and what fans can expect from him.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that. A Western Conference player, maybe people might not have gotten a look at, but he's a bucket when he gets going for sure. We will look forward to that from Noah on the website, NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. We appreciate you guys as always. Sixers Talk Podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works for our producer, Ben Berry and Noah Levick. I'm Danny Pommells. We'll see you next time.